Barbara Ball. I'm the director at the Windsor Public Library, and we are so lucky tonight. Marv Klassen-Landis has been helping people write stories and poems for decades, with preschool through college students and at libraries, senior centers, and hospitals. He has also helped people share their poems and stories in anthologies and public performances. I said, Marv, why don't we do it here in Windsor? You can lead workshops to help people write and tell stories, and also teach volunteers how to go out and help others write. Then we'll put together an anthology and do a public celebration. And he wonderfully agreed. So I wrote a grant, yay. I wrote a grant to the Vermont Arts Council, and they agreed to fund it. So, yay. Tonight's performance is the kickoff to the project, and Marv invited his wonderful friends Michael, Zerphy, and Ham, Gillett to join in this evening. Michael and Marv have been friends since 1971, and they became friends with Ham, who also befriended them in 1991. Michael, Ham, and Marv will be sharing examples of the kinds of writing that will happen in the workshops. Much of it is their original works. Other examples come from participants in Marv's past projects, with their permission for their writing to be shared.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much for coming out. Great to see everybody. I'm going to be doing a storytelling workshop on November 18th, and we thought tonight we'd give you some examples, some stories. And I'm going to start it off with the story of our honeymoon. Well, part of the story. I'm a wilderness guy. I love canoeing, camping, being in the wilderness. So we started talking about honeymoon. I knew exactly where I wanted to go, the Okefenokee Swamp. And Bess was like, sounded a little wild, and so we compromised. Well, we decided to go camping on the Gulf of the Florida Gulf. Had a whole island to ourselves. It was great. We went to the Smokies on the way down. But on the way down, we borrowed a canoe. We said, well, we'll just go for a couple of days and we'll just find a river in the panhandle of Florida. Great idea, right? Turns out Okefenokee would have been maybe a better choice. But we started paddling on this river. And as we were paddling along, we would see an alligator. And we'd paddle along and we'd see a cottonmouth, which some of you northerners may not know. A cottonmouth is a very poisonous water snake. And we'd paddle some more, we'd see another gator, another cottonmouth. But they were minding their own business and we were minding our business. It was fine, right? And the bird life was incredible. Beautiful birds, no other people, no rangers, no campsites like the Okefenokee would have had. This was a wilderness area. It was gorgeous. We started getting toward the end of the first day. The light was starting to dim a bit, and we were in this really wet, marshy area, both sides. I was like, as soon as we get this much of dry land, we need a camp. And we're paddling along. I came around the bend. I said, yeah, there it is. And Beth said, I said, what? She pointed at an 8-foot gator right there. And I was like, well, he won't bother us. And then she went, and there was a big cottonmouth right on the bank, sunning itself. And I was guiding the canoe right toward the cottonmouth. And I said, he'll move. And I was right, he did. He slipped into the water and we pulled up our canoe. We pitched the tent, we cooked a great meal, and we had found a little brochure and that said it's a really good idea to get your food up on a rope up in a tree because there's a lot of bears in this area. So I was doing that, and the fire was dying down, and we heard pigs, wild pigs, on the other side of this little river. And I'm not afraid of many North American animals, but what I've read about wild boars is they're really unpredictable and aggressive, and we had no weapons, and we had a fire. So we start building the fire up, building the fire up, build the fire up quick, stay right close to the fire. And the pigs made their way into the river, coming towards us. And all of a sudden, bedlam erupted. We heard this squeal scream of a pig. The gator bellowed, if you've ever heard that sound. That's a pretty impressive, deep sound. And there was this thrashing around in the water, this huge fight between gators and the wild pigs. And they were making so much noise that all these big birds in the trees were squawking and flapping, and the branches were breaking and dropping. It was like the soundtrack of a Tarzan movie like you've never heard. And we're standing there by the fire, and it settled down, and we heard them continue swimming. They went a little upstream from us, which was nice. And then we heard them disappear into the woods. Slowly the sound died out. And I thought, huh, that's over. So we went to bed. And I went right to sleep. I usually do. Early the next morning when the light just starting to get light, probably 4:35, I woke up. I heard this sound right outside our tent. It sounded big, but I've heard noises outside the tent a lot in my life. And I'm like, yeah, sounds as big as a deer or a bear. That means it's maybe a squirrel or a raccoon, because I just kind of translated in my head, and I was ready to fall back to sleep, and I realized Bess is like this. And I said, it's not as big as it sounds. And she said, I've been hearing noises like that all night. Well, I've told this story to many people who immediately ask me, it was always the women ask me, are you still married? I am, because my wife is a real sport and courageous. And the next night, she got more sleep. Definitely. That's the end of my story. All right, so Ham's going to read a couple of stories that were told to me. What I often did in some of my one-to-one projects is they would talk and I would type up the stories. And we're hoping to spread this kind of one-to-one story gathering here in Windsor.
Okay. I grew up just a little tiny background. I grew up in South Woodstock, and I had the great fortune of living for all of my growing up years, and then later when I moved back to Vermont, next to a wonderful couple named Darwin and Mona Hoadley. And they were both native South Woodstockers, had grown up on neighboring farms, married each other. They were the perfect couple in every way, my model marriage. But Darwin loved to tell stories, and he also had quite a Vermont twang. So when Marv showed me this story, I thought, this calls for a little bit of a Vermont twang, so I'm going to read it that way. And the guy probably was a Vermonter, wasn't he, or a New Hampshireite? George Stone. It's called Raking Hay, as told to Marv. When I was about 12, I was raking hay with Brownie. He was a 20-year-old bay who tended to run if you turned him downhill, which I didn't know at the time. I was sitting on the seat, and Ralph was sitting on the little shelf right next to the side of the seat, and I was driving the rig. Ralph was just going for a ride. The rake was a dump rake, one of them long things that are about 10 or 12 feet wide with the tines that lift up and down. And the reins were dragging on the ground because Brownie knew what he had to do. He didn't need no reins. It was a hot day and I was tired, so I wanted to take a break. I picked up one of them reins off the ground to turn him downhill. Well, he took off down the hill. I didn't have time to grab the other rein, and I got thrown between the horse and the whippletree. And then I got rolled around in the hay. Luckily, I didn't get hit by them tines. Ralph rode it out. Brownie ran right between the wagon and the tree, and he got stuck, got the rake stuck. Ralph jumped down and tied him to the wagon. Best part of that story was the neighbors up on the hill about 2 farms away saw the whole thing happen. They always talked about it later, wondering how we ever survived it. And this story is called Death and Laughter by Sue Harvey. At my grandfather's sister's wake, which was held at home, a relative come in and sat down beside the casket and died. My mother, who told me the story, said that they never had got along too well. I decided if someone I don't like dies, I'm staying home. At my grandfather's sister's funeral, someone put the kneeler down in the front row of the church. And immediately my grandfather started crying and moaning, and they said, "It's okay, Uncle John, it's okay," thinking he was upset about his sister, which he was, but that wasn't why he was crying. He gave the person next to him his elbow and yelled, "Get off my foot!" Turns out the kneeler was on his foot, and everyone in the row's weight was on the kneeler. And there weren't too many skinny ones either. They all got off the kneeler, and he gave a big sigh of relief. Everyone in the front row started laughing at that. Oh, another story. Oops. Okay, that's what I'm standing up for. This is a story that happened to me. And I was, in a previous life, a professional actor, and I lived in New York for about 10 years. And a friend of mine and her husband lived in LA, and she called me one day and she said, "I've just been cast in an episodic TV show, and every episode is being shot in a different European city." Tough luck, right? So she said, "How would you like to come out to LA and dog and house sit for us and take care of our pool?" And since I was between engagements, in other words, unemployed at the time, I thought that would be an excellent idea. So out I went, and off they went. And my agent had an office in New York and also on the West Coast. So I thought, this is perfect. I can meet the West Coast agents, and I'm going to be cast in a film or TV, and I'll never go back again. I'm going to make a lot of money. So the morning of the meeting that I had to meet the agents, I spent all morning trying to figure out what to wear to look LA chic. And I borrowed a pair of cowboy boots from my friend Atticus, and I wore one of my many blue shirts, and I thought, I'm looking pretty good. So drove the car to Sunset Boulevard, went up to the office, and a young woman was at the front desk, and she said, "Just please be seated for a moment, and I'll take you in." So I sat down for 5 minutes, and then she came out. She let me into this room, and it was a room that was about from that wall to, I don't know, maybe where Michael is, and then halfway back here. And at the far end of the room, there was a couch, and there were 3 agents sitting on the couch next to each other. And they were not introduced to me. Nobody got up and said hello, shook my hand. The owner of the agency, Martin Gage, was sitting in a chair right here as I came in the door. And I had met him at a picnic, a agency picnic in Central Park several years before. So he knew me, But he turned to me and he said, "Hi, hon." He said, "I'm sorry I can't get up. My brother just died and I've been to the funeral." I said, "Fine. Sorry to hear about your brother." So he ushered me over to this chair, and I sat down in the chair. It was a naugahyde wingback chair on casters that swiveled and tilted back. And there was a very big potted ficus tree right behind the chair. So I just sat there, well, I've got to relax here. So I leaned back and the chair shot completely out from under me. And I'm lying there with my cowboy boots in the air, the ficus tree, which I didn't knock down, but was going like this, and the casters are spinning. And I thought, what do I do now? Well, nobody, of course, got up to help or said anything. So I got up and I rolled myself out and I got the chair back up and I set it down. And as I was sitting down, very carefully, I said, "Well, that's going to make a great chapter in my memoirs." Nothing. And I'm sure they thought that I had rehearsed that whole thing and planned it so that I would make a memory. So they asked me a few questions, and I left. And the next week, they sent me out for an audition. It was for a TV miniseries about World War II. And again, I show up at the audition place, and there's a waiting room full of actors waiting to go in. And this woman comes and says, "I'll take you in now." She walked me in, and again, she introduces me, and there's this big, long room this time, long this way, and there's a door at the far end, and there are about 10 people sitting like agents and producers and directors and whatever. And the woman said, "This is Hamilton Gillett." And I said, "Actually, it's pronounced Gillett." And one of the women in the crowd said, "Why don't you change it?" And I said, "Well, because that's not my name." So I started reading the script, and I got to the last line. And just as I was about to say the last line, the door opens at the far end, and this guy walks in, and he looks at me and he says, "Oh, sorry, I guess I wrecked that for you." That was the end. I left, and I did get sent out on a couple of more auditions, and I never booked anything. And I thought, I'm not sure I want to be in LA. And I'm told afterwards that, it's way too short a time for me to be there to make that decision. But there was something in my gut that said, I don't like these people. I don't like the way I'm being treated. I'm going back to New York. I went back to New York and did a couple more shows. And then I just, on a whim, packed everything up and moved back to Vermont, which is where I always wanted to end up. And I've been here 33 years, and I think I made a great decision.
Thanks, Ham. Michael, do you have any stories?
I think I do.
Does he have any stories?
Those of us who know Michael.
Well, that was a story about work that Ham had there. And I've got some stories about work. Most of my working life I spent on the road, walking down the road, being on the road as a clown. And I learned a lot from being a clown on and off the stage. I learned that to be a good performer, you've got to make a strong choice and stick to it, and then change it. I also learned that people laugh at others' misfortune. That's why clowns fall down. Now, as long as they know that no one's getting hurt. So I had a piece where I tried to sit in a chair for 5 minutes, and I kept falling out of it. But people also enjoy others' success. So parts of that chair came apart, and almost as if by accident, turned into a juggling routine to the surprise and delight of the clown and the audience. And I learned that the show must go on. You ever hear that one? Yeah, the show must go on. I was doing a duet performance at the Indianapolis Children's Museum with a friend of mine, and we were passing juggling clubs in the show. And he was balanced on rolla bola, which is a balancing board on a cylinder, not held by anything. It's a free rolling thing. It's tricky to stay on top of. And that day, he didn't. He fell off of it, fell down, got the biggest laugh of the whole show. Of course, they didn't know that he had gotten hurt, but I did because he turned white immediately. And he looks up and said, "Sir, it's broken." And I'm there, "You have to stop." He said, "No, no, no, keep going." He got back on the thing, and we actually kept juggling. We finished the show, and then we went right to the house. And I learned to think on my feet. I had a series of shows one summer at Indian Head Resort over close to Laconia. Anybody here ever been to Indian Head? Yeah, it's a nice place. And I had a series of shows there on Saturday mornings. It was in a multi-purpose room, just a little raised area in the front for a stage just about this high. Kids would sit on the floor, and then there were a few chairs set up, kind of like this, right? So on a Saturday morning, 20, maybe 30 people would show up, mostly kids, moms, and 2 dads sprinkled in. Well, one weekend, a friend of mine who was a performer was visiting, and I said, "Hey, Pat, do you want to go with me and do a show at Indian Head, and then we'll spend the day up in the White Mountains?" He said, "Yeah, sure." So we go over there, we walk in, there's 100 bikers in there because the Laconia Bike Week was happening. Now, why they were at a kid's show at 10 o'clock in the morning, I don't know. But bikers fill up everything within about a 30-mile radius of Laconia, and this is just really close by. So all these bikers are in there. We're sweating bullets like, "Oh, man, what are we going to do?" And I looked at that and I said, "We're going to do the end of the show first." So we went and we got the biggest guy we could find standing in the back. Big guy with a great big leather jacket, beard coming down to here, big guts sticking out. Brought him up on stage. Of course, he had a cigarette. Put a cigarette in his mouth, and we juggled clubs. Choo, choo, choo. Right in front of his face, behind his head, got closer and closer. Knocked that cigarette right out of his mouth with the clubs. And they were, "Oh, hey!" You know, they loved us. And everybody went and sat down, and then they just enjoyed the show that we had for kids. They were like a bunch of little kids in every way. And I learned that something works, keep it. Now, I was performing another duet show, and with a friend traveling to Czechoslovakia from Germany, and this was back in the Soviet era. So we were crossing the Iron Curtain there, right? And we're crossing the border, and this was a little road up in the mountains, just a little two-lane road. There were no buildings, nothing. There was just a roadblock. Teenagers in uniform standing there with their submachine guns, Kalashnikovs, I think, right? They're standing there. And of course, we couldn't speak their language. They couldn't speak to us. But their passports were showing them. But they were really disturbed that we had this polka dot trunk on the top of our clock. And they wanted to know what was in it. And we're going to, we're clowns. So we knew that's what he meant. So we got it down, we opened it up, and the guy who was kind of seemed to be in charge was going through and looking at things, and saw we had all these props, and he picked up a juggling club and shaking it, knocking it, trying to see like we're hiding something inside the juggling club. And we're there, oh, we knew that he knew what he meant. And he goes, "Show us." And I remember the phone. So we got that guard to stand right up in front of us. He had a cigarette, put it in his mouth, and we started juggling clubs. Right in front of his face, right behind his back. We're standing a few yards apart, passing the clubs back and forth to each other, and they're going right around his head. We came in, boom, knocked the cigarette out. "Whoa, they're clowns, okay. Whoa," packed it up. They helped us put it up on their trunk, and we went on our way, and we performed in Prague. And I learned that comedy and tragedy are very close to each other. About that close. That's how close we were to his nose. And I don't want to think about what would happen if we had hit that guy with a club in the side of the head. I wouldn't do that now.
You sure?
I also learned that there's some things that you cannot predict, and you can't predict somebody's reaction to a plan. You just have to do your job. Right? So I performed a lot of did a lot of residencies where I was in schools and I would work with kids, teach them, and then they would perform. And I was at a school in New Hampshire. I had a lot of kids with disabilities, and there was one guy there, Liam. That's not his real name, but I'm going to call him Liam. He was autistic, and he really didn't participate in much during the year. But he loved when I was a clown. And when I was teaching a class, I had the clown nose on, and I was either performing or playing games with the kids, or even teaching, but I was in that clown persona the whole time. He just loved it. He loved it. And he especially loved this game where we had a trunk like that one, not the same one, but like that one that was up on top of the car, crossing the border there. We had a trunk, and it's full of all kinds of stuff. You open it up and play this game. What is this thing? And you just pull something out, but you pretend it's something different than what it is. So, say you pull out a hat. It's not a hat, it's a steering wheel. And just forever, you can go on and on and on. He loved it. And people were always coming around there taking notes for all the classes, not just when the clown was there. They wanted to make sure that we were doing our job, that everybody was doing their job. So they'd be looking at the notes. Now, one day there were some people in the doorway looking in, and Liam looked up at him and he goes, "Come on in, we're making a mess." He just loved it. When I would go out of class, I would take the nose off and just stick it in my pocket. I'd go eat lunch, walk down the hall, whatever I was doing. Now, the thing is, Liam, whenever he saw me in the lunchroom, he would come over, come right up to my face, and he'd stare a little bit longer than most people would stare, a little bit closer than most people would get. He'd stare and he'd look at me for a long time, and then he'd go, "There's your nose." And I'd say, "Well, Liam, I'm eating lunch now, so I'm not being a clown right now, I'm being a person." So sometimes I would show him if I had it in my pocket, put it back in my pocket. I'd eat lunch, and he would look. And sometimes he'd go, "Oh." And sometimes he'd just smile a little bit and then walk away. But if he saw me 10 minutes later walking down the hall, he'd come up to me and say, "Where's your nose?" Every time. But when I left that school, I gave him a note. And I heard from teachers later that he used it as what he called a swinging buddy. He liked to swing a lot, and he would take a teddy bear or something and place it under the swing and swing. And it would change, but often he was using the clown nose as a swinging buddy. He put it down and he'd swing and swing and swing. Now, I went back there many times over the years, and one time, it was a whole year in between when I went back there. And I went back, I pulled into the parking lot, Liam was swinging, and he saw my car. He knew it was the clown before I even got out of the car. And he came running over, I opened the door, got out, and he looked up at me and he said, "No." So I learned a lot of things, but I also learned that anything that you have as a job can become work, even when your job is to play, which that's what my job was as well. Because if you're doing something and you make it into a business, you got all these other things that are part of it, right, that make it tough, to some degree. So I wrote a blues song. I get slapped for my job and fall out of the chair. And I have to act like I don't even care. I am a clown. I have to fall down. But humor's not free. Punchline is me. But when that audience began to laugh, so plain to see, being a clown brought out the very best in me.
All right. Thank you. All right. Another workshop that I'll be doing is going to be poetry, all kinds of poetry. That's on December 2nd. And we thought I'd share some examples. I'm going to start with some of my own poetry that I've written. First one is called Migration. I walk out into the bay until little waves lap my chin. Stand and lose myself in windless water and cloudless sky. I turn, slow as sand through an hourglass. Look back to the smudged line of beach. An undulating ribbon appears. I stand and wait and watch. A line of butterflies approach, then pass, so close that I see the light glowing through each orange and black wing. And here's one of my children poems. For children, and when I write for children, I very much get into my own childlike space. It's called Bright Summer Moon. Bright summer moon in a tall pine tree. A baby raccoon looking down at me. In a tall pine tree, he seems to grin, looking down at me as I look up at him. He seems to grin, that baby raccoon, as I look up at him in the bright summer moon. All right, one more of mine, and then I'm going to share a participant poem. This one's called Emerge. Ignoring the veils of thin places, we plodded our way toward imagined destinations, swatting at gnats and unsettling doubts about motivation and duplicities. We confused maps with landscapes, endowed happenstance and muddled luck with divine synchronicity, and stepped to a 1-2 backbeat when we could have been dancing to the syncopated drum of joy, even when our hearts were broken. Leaving our fears and flags behind, we emerge from the tangle onto this grassy plain, blinking and squinting in the sunlight. All right, this next one is one of my favorites. One of my first poetry residencies was at Queechee Elementary School, back when it had its own school in the village. And one day, one of the third graders came up to me just as I was about to walk to my next class, and she very shyly said, "Mr. Marv?" I said, "Yeah." She said, would it be okay if I write a poem at home? And I said, "Yeah, that'd be great, Katie." And she said, "I think I better ask my mom." And I said, "Okay, yeah, ask your mom." Well, her mom gave her the right answer, clearly, because the next day she came in and she handed me a lined piece of paper, and I looked at the top in great big block letters. It said ketchup. And I thought, I've never read a poem about ketchup. I've never written a poem about ketchup. Here's a poem about ketchup. Awesome. I read it and I loved it so much. I asked Katie Finnegan if we could use it as a model for the class, the rest of the class to do. And she said, okay. It went so well that we used it as a model for the whole school. And I don't know how many dozens of schools, hundreds of classrooms, and probably 1,000 or more children have written Katie Finnegan poems and acted them out since. So read the poem already, right? Okay, here's the poem. It goes like this. Ketchup by Katie Finnegan. Do you like ketchup? You can do almost anything with ketchup. You can paint your walls with ketchup. You can dye your sister's hair with ketchup. You can loosen up the hinges with ketchup. My last suggestion, put it on your food. P.S. Don't put it on your eggs. I hate that. Ketchup by Katie Finnegan. All right. Ham's going to also share some poetry.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay. This was a poem written by Deb Williams, who was in one of Marv's programs. It's called Great Grandma's Path. There was a path through my child woods, connecting my small world with my great grandmother's big one. Some days she would emerge from it into my world as if by magic, tall, white-haired, wrinkled, straight, with her cane. Some days, my father's hand would guide me to her world, down that woods path, around roots and rocks. The old earth turned, and one brave day I walked that path alone, with pride, to her house. The old earth turned again, and one dark night I chose to walk that path home. I can do it, Grandma. Small feet feeling the path, each rock, each root, each worn bit of earth. This was the freedom she gave me, the child knowledge that I could somehow navigate any path I ever found myself on. And this is a poem by me. Speaking of kids' poems. I cannot go to bed with dirt between my toes. I cannot go to sleep with boogers in my nose. You may think that this is odd as odd can be, but no one knows his toes and nose quite as well as me. And I wrote this poem in one of Marv's workshops. What if we had a box of laughter, like chocolates, on our coffee table, or kitchen counter, or bedside table? There'd be a guide to tell us what's inside each one. Today, I feel like having uncontrollable laughter, breath stopping, throat aching, tears down the cheek making, stomach muscles hurting. On Friday, I might try a giggle. On Saturday, a guffaw. Next Tuesday, when I really need it, I'll consume a subdued, muffled, try to stifle in a church pew, hysterical, I don't dare let it out kind of laughter. Michael.
So those are some poems, and I have a song which is a story, but it's also a poem. So here we go. Get the right rhythm. I was walking in the woods one night, banjo at my side, going to play at the local barn dance. Darkness filled the sky. All of a sudden the trees did shake. I was filled with fright. Thought that I was in an earthquake. Then I was surrounded by light. All of a sudden the trees did shake. I was wondering if I was awake. That was the night saw my first UFO. Whoa, whoa, whoa! All of a sudden the trees did shake. I was wondering if I was awake. That was the night saw my first UFO. Whoa, whoa, whoa! Well, believe it or not, I saw a little green man. He had a banjo too. Long skinny fingers like a rubber band. He said, take me to the dance with you. I've been alone in space so long, I learned banjo from the radio waves. Before I could speak, he started to strum. Man, could that guy play? All of a sudden, the trees did shake. I was wondering if I was awake. That was the night saw my first UFO. Oh, 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 yeah, all of a sudden, the trees did shake. I was wondering if I was awake. That was the night saw my first UFO. Oh, oh, oh. Well, we went to the bar, joined the band. Dancing was so high. They played along and said, you're out of this world. Nobody wanted us to stop. My little green friend asked us to tour. We all said, all right. Now we're known across the galaxy. We play every Saturday night. UFO is our tour bus. There's no charge for gas. Dance never stops wherever we go, man. I sure hope it's lasts. Sometimes we play on Mars, and those rings of Saturn do swing. Jupiter has a great red spot. Who ever heard such a thing? On every planet, the trees do shake. Pinch myself, but I'm awake. Star tonight, saw the first UFO. Oh no, oh yeah, oh no, oh, oh yeah. Pinch myself, I'm awake. Whoa, whoa. Star tonight, saw the first UFO. Oh yeah, on every planet the trees can shake. Pinch myself, but I'm awake. Star tonight, some first UFO. Pinch myself, oh, I pinch myself. Yeah, star tonight, oh, yeah, star tonight. Star tonight, summer first UFO. Happened right up there by the farm.
I believe it. All right, another one of my workshops I'll be doing is called Personal Writing, and it's all about how to get started when you don't really know what to write, and maybe you're not even sure you want to write. You're looking at a blank page, so I'll be teaching all these different techniques to get going, and it's any kind of writing. It might be writing in a journal, it might be totally private, and it might turn into a poem or a song or a story. You never know. So we're going to do some short poems now that kind of come out of that space of just writing from inside and see what happens. We're going to start with Ham.
This is called Under the Pines. Long ago, when I wore pajamas, my father was drunk, and I was too scared of him to say goodnight. Before my barefoot brother and I went upstairs to bed, my mother led us out into the autumn dark to pee under the pines by my aunt and uncle's house. The gentle Cape Cod surf and the breeze unable to calm my shivering. Too scared to pass my dad to pee in the bathroom. Too afraid to be grabbed by my dad, who probably just wanted to hug me goodnight.
Thank you. Sometimes what comes out is hard, and getting in touch with it and letting it out can really be healing. And then getting to the point where you can share it with other people, that's an even deeper kind of healing. I worked with a man named Dan O'Neill, and he came in one time for a one-to-one writing time. He said, "Marv," this was after a big snow. He's like, "I was out with a snowblower, and the snowblower it started talking to me, kind of, and was giving me some pretty good advice. And after a while, I thought, I need to write this down." I'm like, yes. He went inside, he wrote it down, he read what he had written. I had a few questions. I helped him structure the order just a little bit, but it's totally in his words, what he learned. And it's called Lessons from a Snowblower. Create a starting point from your center. Outline the edge. Section areas off. Open up your center by working each section out to the edge and slightly beyond. Take as much of a bite as you can handle. Attempt to lay a perfect path. The finish comes from within. So next time you're out there with a snowblower or whatever mixer, listen. You never know. I'm going to read one more poem that's really coming from within. One of the things I did at Dartmouth-Hitchcock, I was there 12 years as a creative writer. Part of my work was exactly what we've been talking about. And there was a young woman who would come in periodically to get infusions, and she would say, "Hi, Marv, I'm not a writer." And I said, "Yeah, I know, you told me." And we would just chat a little bit, and I'd go on. One day she said, "Can I tell you a dream? I had this amazing dream." I said, "Alejandra, I'd love to hear your dream." She told me her dream, and I said, "Alejandra, could I type up what you just told me?" She said, "Okay." And I asked her a few questions, got it again, and then I read it back to her, like the poem that it was. And she just looked at me. Guess what? At that moment, Alejandra knew that she was a poet. And she started coming to every writing workshop I offered. And she, despite being fairly quiet on the shy side, stood up in front of 80, 90 strangers, read her poetry. We all loved her. So this is Exploding Stars by Alejandra Casco. Dressed in white and lying in a white bed in the center of a glass room atop a skyscraper, I wake and see a large single star overhead, so near. I sit up, as if it had been waiting for me to notice it. The star explodes into many stars. I see each one individually as each new star explodes into many other stars. multiplying into trillions of stars, lighting up and filling the sky and beyond. I wake up laughing, filled with joy, peace, and the pleasure of God. It's Alejandra. Now, I know this guy does some interesting experiments. His time.
Yeah, this is an experiment with what Marv started off this section with. Like, we really don't know what to write. What do you do when you want to do something and you don't know how to get going? So this is called doing nothing. I woke up this morning, went downtown, got a cup of coffee, happy as a hound, doing nothing again. When you're good at doing nothing really sets in. Went for a drive to nowhere, easy for me. Know just how to get there. You do nothing again. When you're good at doing nothing really sets in. You did nothing this morning, nothing at night, nothing in between. And that's alright. Doing nothing again. When you're good at doing nothing really sets in. Now, I have a lot of time to do nothing these days because I'm retired. And a lot of people can't wait to retire. And they think it's going to be the best thing that ever happened to them. And then they retire, and not too much time passes by. And they're calling up their friends and saying, this is the worst thing that ever happened. You know why? Because they got too much time on their hands, and they don't know how to do nothing. But I don't have that problem. Did nothing for a while, and then I did it again. And when you go to doing nothing really sets in. Doing nothing again. When you're good at doing nothing really sets in. So people come to me and they say, how come you're so good at doing nothing? And I say, well, I think it's because I was trained to do nothing in my job. I said, what was your job? I say, I was a clown. They go, what? You were a clown? You must be kidding. And I say, not anymore. I'm a clown, retired clown. I like to play around. I'm a clown, retired clown. I like to make up stuff. Make up stuff. Now, see, we clowns know the secret of where stuff comes from. And I'm going to tell you. It comes right from nothing. That's right, nothing. Kind of uncomfortable, isn't it? Not knowing what's going to happen. Now, see, most people don't do nothing long enough to see what comes out the other side. They get bored and give up, or they get scared and run away. But us clowns, we're not scared of nothing. No. In fact, we're trained to stay with nothing, play with nothing, get right down in there and that, not knowing, hang out for a while, find what's in there, and bring it to life. Sound confusing? It's not. It's simple. It's child's play. No, it really is child's play. You ever see a kid who plays with a box instead of the toy that the box came in? Because the box doesn't have any rules. It's got unlimited potential. So that's what clowns learn. What we all do, but yeah. I like something that comes from nothing but really is something. I don't like something that really is nothing. And there's a lot of that in the world these days. All you have to do is take a look around. And what I want to do is help to bring more good nothing into the world. Did nothing for a while, and then I did it again. And when you go to doing nothing really sets in. Doing nothing again. When you're good at doing nothing, nothing really ever has to end. When you're good at doing nothing, nothing really has to end. Doesn't have to end. It doesn't have to end. It doesn't have to end. It's not over. 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 It's not over yet. Whoa, hey, woo, whoa, whoa, woo, woo, woo. I'm gonna work the prayer in progress. Are we all?
I love what Michael just said. A lot of what you said, but what really got me was stay with not knowing, play with not knowing, find out what's in there, and bring it to life. And that's really what this project is all about. Just not knowing necessarily what your story is or that you want to share, and staying in there, playing with it and finding out. And then really hope that some of you all get the bug of what I call being a story midwife. Really, where you sit down with somebody who thinks, I don't have a story, or I don't really like to write, and get a conversation going. And lo and behold, they do have something amazing to say and possibly share it. So my last workshop is going to be December 16th. We're calling it Interview Skills. It's not interviewing exactly like we think of an interview, but it's sitting down and asking questions and helping somebody find their way into expressing something. Might be a poem, might be a story, might be words to live by, might be just a little anecdote. And we're really hoping to get people to help in that process. And we often think of a story collecting project as people of a certain age being interviewed about when they were kids long ago. What Barbara and I are interested in is, yes, we love those stories, but we also would love stories from children now and people of all ages now. And we're going to put an anthology together and do a sharing where rather than us so-called professionals up here, it'll be people from the community reading their work. That's the goal. And like I said, any ages would be great. This really cute flyer. I hope you picked it up. Take it with you with the different workshops. Barbara found this really cute. Barbara has some really cute pictures of elderly folks, and they're way cuter than most of us. But keeping, so yeah, speak for myself, I know. But keep in mind, this is not just about the elderly. This is all ages. So that workshop is really going to focus on, well, how do you make this happen? And I've got a lot of skills and techniques, and could make a handbook for everybody. I'd like to tell one story about somebody I met at the cancer center at Dartmouth. I walked in, and part of my job was just to walk around and introduce myself to people, see if they were interested. I walked in, I looked around, and I saw a patient there, really tall, big guy, with a skull and crossbones bandana, white beard, worn denim, tattoos. I was looking at him, and I thought, write a poem? I don't think so. And I thought, Marv, you don't know that. I keep pretty good, strict tabs on myself sometimes. Like, Marv, you don't know that. You don't know that. So I walked up to him, and I didn't introduce myself and tell him what I did and blah, blah, blah. I I went country style. You start with, you chat a while before you get down to business, right? That's the polite thing to do. And I asked him about one of his tattoos. We got to talking about, he somehow ended up on the subject of his powder blue Harley motorcycle. And he started telling me he doesn't know, he doesn't know what to do with it when he's gone. It's too big for his wife. His kids aren't into motorcycles. He's like, and we chatted for a while, and then he said, "But what do you do here?" He's like looking at my badge, trying to figure out who is this guy, right? And I said, "Well, I help people write." He says, "What?" I said, "We know sometimes people just talk with me, and I type it up. It might be a story, it might be a poem." And he said, "Yeah, let's try it." I said, "All right." And his buddy Sam was sitting there, who had a long white beard, similar outfit, looked like Santa Claus in a biker outfit. Really smiley guy. And I said, "Okay, so Bruce," I got my laptop up. "What have you been thinking about?" He said, "I told you. What am I going to do with my Harley when I'm gone?" His buddy Sam says, "That sounds like a country song." And I said, "What am I going to do with my Harley when I'm gone? What am I going to do with my Harley when I'm gone?" In the middle of the infusion suite. That's how I roll sometimes. They laughed, we all started laughing, and I said, "Well, it sounds like a good title." So I picked it. And I said, so what are your ideas?" "Well, I could put it in the ground." And Sam, his buddy, immediately says, "Or let your ex-old lady ride it around." And Bruce laughed, I laughed, and then Sam just sat and watched, and he had so many ideas, and we worked with rhyme and rhythm, and it was a lot of humor like that, but it was really poignant because he was serious. This is his beloved motorcycle. What's going to happen to it? Because my time here is limited. It was just a beautiful, beautiful example of, did he think he was a writer? No. Is he a writer? Was he a writer? Yes, absolutely. And that song, I asked a couple of staff people to perform it at our celebration, and they brought the house down. It meant so much to Bruce. It was amazing. It's amazing. I asked Han to tell one last story that really gets to the heart of what we've been sharing, I think. And then I'm going to close with a very small, short poem.
As I mentioned, I used to be in the theater, and of all the years that I lived in New York, I managed to get out of the city in the summer except twice. And I had to have a survival job because I was, once again, I did work actually, telling all these between engagement stories. I got a job working for a very upscale landscaping company who did, most of the clients were in New York, were in Manhattan. We loaded a grove of birch trees up onto a rooftop in the West Village through the passenger elevator to go around a reflecting pool. We did a rooftop garden on a penthouse for a couple who spent the entire summer in the Hamptons, but they wanted to have their penthouse look nice. Another of our clients was a nursing home, and it was up on the Upper West Side. For anybody who knows New York, it was right in the same neighborhood as St. John the Divine. And so I showed up. I was occasionally sent out by myself to do maintenance work. And so I showed up one morning, and I walked in, and it was a high rise. And I walked in, and it was what everybody's vision of a nursing home is. They're just people in wheelchairs lined up along the corridor. Some of them were asleep. Some of them were staring off somewhere. And so the person at the front desk showed me to the door, and I walked by, and I sort of waved and smiled at everybody. And I went out. It was a beautiful garden. There was a manicured lawn. and these trees and shrubs and annuals and perennials, and a path that went up, a paved path that sort of went through the lawn. So I put down my tools and I started to work. And before long, this woman came out of the building in a wheelchair, and she was wheeling herself backwards like this. She was just going around the path backwards. And she rolled up next to me, and I just looked up and I said, hello. And she wasn't speaking, and she didn't stay long, and then she just started her journey back into the building. Day was over. The next day I came back, and sure enough, she showed up again. And this time she stopped, and I turned around and I stopped what I was doing, and I said, how are you today? It's a beautiful day. Say a word. So she went around her loop, and I did my gardening, and I came back for the third and last day, and I'm gardening, and out she comes again. And I looked and saw her coming, and she was coming down the path toward me, and she was holding a framed something in her lap. And she rolled up next to me, and I said, good morning. And she just picked up the frame, and it was a painting. And I don't know whether she did it or somebody else did it, but she just held it like this. And I said, oh, that's really beautiful. And she looked at me, she said, thank you. She put the painting back down. No, and as I was leaving, I stopped at the front desk, and I think it was the head nurse, and I was telling her about this, and she said, that woman has been here for a number of years, and she has never said a word to anyone. What a gift for me. And I left.
Thanks, Sam. And that gets right to it. It's all about presence, being present with someone. And that's the heart of the project, even though it's lots of great words are going to come out of it. There's a sign-up sheet right over there if you're interested in any part of the project or learning more about it. You can ask me or Barbara afterwards as well. And I'm going to close with one of my shorter poems. All right. Well, again, thanks so much for coming out and being such incredible listeners. And we hope some of you spread the word and get involved in the project. So I'm going to close with a little gift, one of my shorter poems. It's called Mist. You are not sinking. The mist is rising. Allow yourself to float. Love will hold you. Thank you. Good night.